Well, today my guest is author Ken Harmon. We're going to be talking to him about his new book, The Fat Man, A Tale of North Pole Noir from Dutton. Now, Ken is an award-winning copywriter, writes commercials. He's a community theater buff. And since he does voices for leprechauns and elves in commercials, it is rumored that he is actually one of Santa's elves. When he's not living in the North Pole, he lives in North Carolina with his family. Well, Ken, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jacqueline. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, this is such a funny book. I'm giggling all the way through it, and I'm giggling as I think about it. So the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that I understand that Santa himself put his stamp of approval on the book. So tell us what the storyline is.
Well, the story is that there is one elf in Santa's corps named Gumdrop Coal. And Gumdrop was in charge of executing the naughty list. It was Gumdrop's idea to put coal in children's stockings, and Gumdrop loved his job. He loved making sure that the naughty children got their just desserts. In fact, he liked his job so much that some other elves thought he was getting out of hand, and Gumdrop was fired. And when he was fired, he promised Santa he wouldn't punish kids anymore, but he didn't say anything about the parents that create naughty kids. And so Gumdrop enjoys himself settling the hash of naughty parents, and when one of them ends up dead, Gumdrop is framed for murder.
Oh,
and
yes.
and as he unravels the mystery, he discovers somebody's playing reindeer games for keeps.
That's for sure.
They're not only after Gumdrop, they're after Santa, and he's got to solve the mystery.
Absolutely. Now, Gumdrop Coal was actually born in the year of 725 A.D., so he's about 1,300 years old. Isn't that right?
Yes, and he's old and kind of grumpy, which explains his disposition against naughty kids. But, you know, elves, they don't have the same life expectancy as we do. They can live thousands and thousands of years.
Yes. And, of course, the Fat Man is in the title is Santa, who at the time the story begins, he's falling apart, and he and Christmas itself is being threatened. And that's a real problem. And as you say, our Gumdrop goes after the mystery to try to solve it. But we're going to get into that a little more about it, and I think the one thing that I want to ask you about is that, as I understand from your book, not all elves are good elves. So describe what they're like and some of the perks they might get. And is Candy Cane one of them?
Candy Cane is one of them. He's Charles Candy Cane, and he's an up-and-coming elf. And elves, just like us, Jacqueline, you know, we're not all good, or we're not all good all the time. And we can have bad days and be cranky and play office politics. And that's what's going on with Gumdrop. He gets in the middle of a power struggle, and he sees what it's doing to Santa, and he tries to stop it. And, of course, it's not going to be easy because it's a bigger plot than Gumdrop has imagined, and he's in for it. As he says, it's more tangled than a cheap string of lights.
More tangled than a cheap string of lights. I like that one. Well, for those of you just tuning in, I am talking to author Ken Harmon about his new book, The Fat Man, A Tale of North Pole Noir from Dutton. But although Ken does voices for leprechauns and elves in commercials, he will not confirm the rumor that he is indeed one of Santa's elves. I don't know. Maybe by the time of the interview, we can get him to admit that. Well, Ken, we're going to go back to the storyline. Now, the story does take place in Kringle Town, and since he lives there, how does Santa know when we are sleeping and when we are awake and all of that? You explain that in the book.
Well, yes, he has these elves, this corps of elves, and elves really have superpowers. Gumdrop says, you know, we can do more than those roofs and a cape ever could. We can turn invisible. We can fly. We can pop into your world. You'll never recognize us. we're around all the time spying on you, and you don't even know it. And so that's how Santa takes care of things. And, of course, that's how Gumdrop is able to pull off some of his capers.
Mm-hmm. Well, I loved all of the analogies, of course, that you use in the book, and it makes sense that if it's a story about Kringle Town, we're going to hear about all of these things that happen at Christmas. And I think one of the funniest things that really gave me a big laugh was I got a copy of the Marshmallow World Gazette, which I know covers Kringle Town and the North Pole, and there's a column in there by Butternut Snitch. And I read that column, and she was talking about all kinds of things, but went on to say, and if I may read this little bit, because I think this is one of the funniest things, she describes the fact that nosy nightlife spies said a certain reindeer was really kicking up her hooves at the hustle and bustle. Witnesses say the little vixen staggered home mumbling, "I'll never do that for $2 again." I just think that is absolutely one of my favorites. So,
well, thank you.
Let's talk about this Marshmallow World Gazette and Butternut Snitch. Who is Butternut Snitch?
Well, she like you said, she's the gossip columnist for the Kringle Town newspaper, and I needed, not only when I was creating this world of Kringle Town, to show that its similarities to our world, I also needed a way to explain parts of the story where Gumdrop couldn't necessarily know them. Gumdrop is our narrator, and so I had to drop some clues now and then about other stuff going on in Kringle Town that could or could not be working against them. And so that's where the idea of the newspaper came up. And because Gumdrop is linked to a certain female reporter at the Marshmallow World Gazette, it only made sense that could start tongues wagging. And who better than to fan the flames of gossip than Butternut Snitch?
Yes, and we're going to talk about that romance that develops as well. But it is so clever, and I know you do write commercials and you do all kinds of fun things, but the way you brought in all of the holiday stuff and the conversations that they would have and the way that was put together, I think is absolutely just so much fun. Now, how did you get the idea, or where did it come from, or what was your inspiration to do this?
Well, there are several things. I've always loved those old hard-boiled detective novels of the 30s and 40s, the Dashiell Hammett and James Cain and Raymond Chandler novels. I just loved the language and the fun that they had with the language. And I started to wonder, what if Santa had an elf who kind of went rogue and started to be an enforcer of naughty children, and what would happen, and that's where the two came together. Something happens, and he's got to solve the mystery. And then I knew I could use that language, the old hard-boiled detective novels. And then, like Gumdrop says, these people in Kringle Town don't just come to life after Halloween. They're living 24/7, 365 days a year. And, like us, they sometimes have bad days and put on their cranky pants, and they have a life beyond us.
Yeah, they're cranky pants. I like that. Well, what was fun, too, was the way you developed the story that as we said in the beginning, Santa's fallen apart. He's thin. He's not the robust Santa that we know today. I mean, there were a lot of problems going on there. So the way that developed was certainly terrific. Now, you did mention the fact that a crime occurs and Gumdrop is suspected. Now, he's taken off for the island of Misfits on a ship named Scrooge, which is captained by Skipper Tiny Tim. Now, tell us who lives on the island and why are they on this island?
Well, the misfit toys are an accident caused by elves. They were either bad toy ideas or in production. The elves made them up, and they're looked on as second-class citizens in Kringle Town. And so Santa decided, for their safety and the safety of everyone, that the misfits should have their own island and kind of be set apart, so no one makes fun of them, and in turn, the misfits don't retaliate against the elves for causing their misfitness.
Their misfitness. Could you describe some of them? I thought that was a lot of fun too. Some of the toys that you describe and how they don't work.
I just, what are some of the worst toys that could be created for a child? There was, I think, Squirrely Nut Breath, who was just a pet squirrel with a awful breath, and then two of Gumdrop's best friends on the Misfit Isle are Sherlock Stetson and his partner Jaja.
They were very funny. Talk a little bit more about them.
They were ideally supposed to be a kind of cowboy and his wife's detective team, but they just didn't work out. And Sherlock's kind of dim. He couldn't find a clue if it were right in front of him. And Jaja is kind of bitter about that because she has to end up solving the clues for him. And children didn't want them because Sherlock and Zaza were always fighting, and it reminded them too much of their parents.
Uh-huh.
So they went to the Misfit Isle.
You captured Jaja very well, I think, in her accent and her nagginess. And I don't blame the children for not wanting them. Now, how come the ship is named Scrooge? We probably know the answer to that, but I want to hear it from you. And why is it captained by Tiny Tim?
Well, Tiny Tim, in his own little way, is a misfit too, because he kind of stands apart from the rest of the Cratchit children in Charles Dickens' novel, and so he feels some kinship with the Isle of Misfit Toys, and so he operates the ferry that goes back and forth. But of course, he owes everything to Mr. Scrooge, so he names his ship after good old Ebenezer.
Uh-huh. Now, is he happier though about this job that he has, and that he goes back and forth between the two islands, between the two places, but he still has to live on the island, the Misfit Island, isn't that right?
Right, until he's called upon, at Christmas time, Tiny Tim is usually called upon to be this kind of mealy-mouthed cherub over in the corner while Scrooge chews the scenery. And he likes it, but he wishes he could do more. He does have a good heart, but as you can imagine, nothing is truly pure in Kringle Town all the time, and Tiny Tim figures greatly into the plot a little later.
Mm-hmm. Yes, he does. Now, if you're doing a commercial for an elf, what does your voice sound like? Will you give us an example of that?
Well, I'm ashamed to say that it's mostly what you hear now. It just seemed, one of my favorite stories when I used to do a lot of theater, as I went up for a reading and the director said, "That was fine, but could you use your real voice?"
Oh.
So anytime someone or I wrote a spot with elves or leprechauns, it seemed that I was called upon, and they said, "You don't really have to do anything, just read." And that kind of contributed to the Fat Man, too, because I realized if you had elves say things that you don't expect elves to say, that's inherently funny. And so if I try to talk tough, even to my little boy, he doesn't take it serious.
Ken, I want you to tell the listeners how you see this book. I think it's important for you to mention what you said to me during the break.
Well, Jacqueline, I just wanted everybody to know it's not a children's book. It's certainly for people who are a child at heart and enjoy all the holiday stories, kind of seeing bent on their ear. It's a tongue-in-cheek parody of the old detective novels and all the holiday characters and stories that we've heard all our lives. It just puts them in a different light and twists them up a little bit. But I think if you were reading this to a little kid, you might have some explaining to do, and then I would definitely end up on your naughty list.
Well, yeah, and
I don't want that.
No, because you know what happens to those that are naughty in Kringle Town, so we certainly don't want that to happen. But it is a book that a teenager would enjoy, maybe even a preteen would enjoy it, and it is a lot of fun. There's a lot of laughs, as you say. It is a tongue-in-cheek. And for those of you that did just tune in and you're on your way home, you can catch the show live on kptr1450.com. And I do want to mention at this time also that the show is going to be repeated the two Saturday holidays. So you have plenty of time to catch the whole show, and it will also be live on kptr1450.com. Now, I want to talk with you, Ken, about the romance. You had mentioned a character earlier, Rosebud Jubilee. Now, along the way of what is the main character's name? Gumdrop Coal? Are we correct on that? Along the way, Gumdrop Coal is trying to solve a murder that has happened, and he gets blamed for, and Santa's in trouble. And along the way, a romance develops with Rosebud Jubilee. The thing that I thought was fun about Rosebud Jubilee, she likes to drink peanut butter and banana daiquiris, but they're non-alcohol, of course. It's peanut butter and banana. So tell us about Rosebud Jubilee.
She is one of my favorite characters in the book because she is a real just crackerjack. She's kind of based on all those great dames from the movies in the 1930s and 40s.
She sure is.
That would be played by Barbara Stanwyck or Jean Arthur or Rosalind Russell. I mean, she takes nothing from nobody. She is Gumdrop's equal match in toughness and smarts and sass. And like I said, she is the chief reporter for the Marshmallow World Gazette. She is all about scoops and getting the big story. And she smells a rat in the figgy pudding, covering Gumdrop Coal in his fall from grace. And tries to get on his side. He doesn't believe her. She's still trying to keep on his side and help him unravel the mystery. And sooner than later, a romance develops between these two elves. But he's still keeping her at arm's length because Gumdrop is not a type of guy that gets tangled up with a dame. But
right,
he hasn't met anybody like Rosebud.
Like most noir detectives are, they're always keeping the dames at arm's length. So yes, he has to. Right. He has to do that. I want to mention too. There's some great illustrations in the book. Now, who did the illustrations? Because in the book cover, it talks about the jacket art and the jacket design, but I don't see who did the illustrations. Maybe I've just missed it. Do you know who did them?
Yes, I do. It's a young lady named Andrea Tsurmi. I believe her last name is spelled Tsurmi. And she's a great, great artist that the publisher that Dutton found. And because we were looking around for somebody with a distinct style, and the picture you see in the front of the book of the elf with a gun, she had something similar like that on her website, and we said, she's the one.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And she just did a great job. She captured exactly the kind of look we wanted.
Absolutely. They are terrific. I also like the fact the titles, the chapter titles are really great. Chapter 1 is called Nutcracker, of course. Chapter 2 is I'm Telling You Why. Chapter 3 is Yes, Virginia. 4 is The Jingle Bell Rock. And it goes on and on and on like that, and Deck the Halls and all of that sort of thing. So that's really Great. How did you enjoy working with the publisher? It sounds like they gave you really terrific support in this.
Oh, yes, they did. Ben, the editor, was just a great guy. He was enthusiastic about it from the beginning, and we changed very little. We did some edits in the second half, and in fact added a second murder, and that's all we really did besides clean up my atrocious typing. and but yeah, the titles were a lot of fun. I'll tell you real quick. I thought it would be clever to have, phrases from Christmas carols and Christmas stories as the titles to each chapter that kind of illustrated what the chapter was about.
Mm-hmm.
And you think you think you're having fun after the first 6 or 7. Getting, in the chapters in the 20s, I was like, oh no, what can this be? What can this be? I wonder what, the search engine people thought of me looking up Christmas carols in the middle of June, trying to figure out what phrases I could use.
Yeah, I'm sure that happens. Well, now here's where we start getting into some really exciting stuff in the story, because on his journey to save Santa, Gumdrop Coal gets into all kinds of trouble, especially in the mistletoe forest where he's almost impaled.
Right.
That's one of his first big, he was really threatened with his life. Can we talk a little bit about the mistletoe forest?
Sure. This was one of the great gifts of the novel. I knew I needed, some big action scene where Gumdrop was in peril, and I did some research and found out that this is true. The mistletoe is sometimes referred to as the vampire plant because it's a parasite. It latches on to other plants and sucks nutrients out of them. And I went, well, how fun.
Yeah,
now,
I never knew that. That was amazing.
And so I thought, well, maybe I can get some of the Twilight audience to read it now, that it's a vampire plant. So you can, they're vampire plants on steroids. So that's what Gumdrop has to battle when he goes into the mistletoe forest.
Well, that was really, I found it an exciting chapter. I really did, especially not knowing the history of the mistletoe. Well, then he also runs into something even worse. He's threatened by a giant nutcracker, the 22-foot-tall Tannenbaum, who tries to destroy him. And but someone, without giving too much away, someone connected with By George Adventures comes along to help out. Talk a little bit about the Nutcracker, and then talk about the character Dingleberry, who was enamored with By George Adventures.
Well, Tannenbaum, the joke in that is a visual one because it's Tannenbomb instead of Baum, and he's just a twisted piece of driftwood that has been created in this giant nutcracker, and he's kind of a mindless monster, and he has been employed by one of the bad guys to protect the bad guy, and Gumdrop has to take him on as he follows his quest. But Gumdrop is aided by his best friend in Kringle Town, the purest, best elf in Santa's court, Dingleberry Fizz. Dingleberry is innocent as the driven snow. He's good at heart. All he cares about is building toys for children. But Dingleberry is also a fanboy. He's like a comic book fanboy. He collects comics based on the By George Adventures from the It's a Wonderful Life movie. George Bailey has been created and memorialized in Kringle Town in a comic book series that Dingleberry just idolizes. He just idolizes them. He wants to be so much like By George, he can't help it. And so Dingleberry's first instinct probably wouldn't be to fight, but to get to have a By George adventure like his hero, he will follow Gumdrop anywhere and support his best pal.
Mm. That was a clever thing also, and I suppose you would have to tie in It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, how many years have we lived every holiday with that movie, and it's always popular with all ages, and was that one of your favorite movies as well?
It is. It's one of my favorite movies here. Here in North Carolina, we always do the 5-minute version of It's a Wonderful Life at the community theater. And
a 5-minute version of It's a Wonderful Life?
Right. We do all the highlight lines, and I threaten anyone who tries to be George Bailey. So.
I would love to hear a 5-minute version of It's a Wonderful Life. Can you give us a couple of seconds of that? Do you remember any of it?
Well, we just do some of the, the bigger lines of, what do you want, Mary? You want the moon because you can swallow it. See, it'll come out your hair and your eyes and your fingertips. and we just do, quick little things like that. And
what fun. What fun.
Takes place in 5 minutes.
Are you a popular guy where you live, having written this book? Do people have a lot of fun talking to you about it, and do they want to ask you all kinds of questions about it?
I wouldn't say I'm popular. I mean, I can still walk down the street now. All of my friends who have known that these kind of twisted little stories have been in my head for years, they are quite excited about it, and make jokes about being in my elf entourage and things like that.
Right.
So I've taken quite a bit of ribbing.
I bet you have. Well,
folks.
Yeah. The story does have a happy ending because we have Santa come every year to give toys out at Christmas. So what is the moral of the book, if you can do that briefly?
Well, part of Gumdrop's problem is that he wants things to be fair. That's why he created the naughty list, so it would be fair that only good children got gifts. And what he discovers is that he really can't control that, and that's not the meaning of Christmas. We all got a gift at Christmas that we didn't deserve. And Gumdrop learns that lesson by the end of his adventure.
Well, and we failed to mention that the reason he has the name Gumdrop Coal is he was responsible for giving putting coal in the stockings of the bad kids, and that's a very important point to cover. So there is a moral. So what you're saying is that we all must keep holly jolly thoughts and be good for goodness sake. Is that right?
That's right. Because just don't pout, don't cry. I'm telling you why.
Well, and that's why Santa Claus is coming to town again this year. So, and I think everybody loves that song about Santa Claus. And why don't you also talk a little bit about how Santa changed his method of delivering gifts and that sort of thing, and how we got the reindeers together. We've got just a little time left that you can talk about that briefly, and I might have to interrupt you, but go.
Oh, okay. Well, Santa was always of the mind that the best children deserve the best gifts, and that's why he didn't want to give out any of the misfit toys.
Okay, so I'm going to have to interrupt you here, and people are going to read the book and find out what's going on, because Santa Claus is coming to town again, so everybody listening has to be good boys and girls out there, all of you grown-ups, and we're out of time. Thanks so much for being here, Ken. Have a happy holiday.